Oh, hey there, listeners. Welcome back to the Scale My Ecom Store podcast. As always, I'm your host, Kath Langman, and today we are going to be addressing something fairly big that has been going on this year and really changing the digital advertising landscape. Of course, all of us operating e-commerce businesses, we are operating in this digital landscape. And so, of course, this really does impact us. So if you've been feeling like your Meta ads have been a bit hit and miss over the last, really this year so far, but last couple of months, or you've just really noticed that things aren't working like they used to, you're not imagining it. There has been a major shift. So Meta has officially rolled out its biggest update since the infamous Apple iOS 14 privacy change that really turned digital advertising on its head a few years ago. So this new update is called Andromeda. A little bit dramatic, I know. And today I'm going to break down what it is, what it means for your ads and your business, what you need to be really doing differently right now, and how you can get some free help, free expert help to make sure that you really are on the right track. So, shall we dive in? Now, what's the problem here, and why is your old ad strategy potentially a bit broken? Now, before we kind of get to what this Andromeda update is all about, let's rewind for a second. So, since the iOS 14 update, I'm trying to remember what year that was in now, maybe 2021 or something. Anyway, digital advertising, especially on Facebook and Instagram, has definitely been harder. It's become more and more expensive and less predictable over time, simply because the platforms that we're all operating with basically stopped sharing conversion data between platforms, and a lot of customers browsing on the internet and on your online store, their behavior online was not trackable due to this privacy update. And, I guess the platforms really had to, you know, figure out a way to do things differently so that the money that their advertisers and, let's face it, that's the income stream by and large for Meta, is still worthwhile for businesses to do. And obviously the trend towards being more expensive and less predictable is not an attractive proposition for most businesses. And and I don't know if you were in business back when that Apple iOS 14 update happened, and of course that was being um, pushed out by Apple, and other platforms essentially had to respond. And I remember Meta took out some like full page advertising, really having a go, which is probably not the most productive response. But anyway, so throughout that and following that particular major update and change, advertisers really did lose a lot of visibility into what was working. Targeting became a lot less precise, and return on ad spend and just, revenue returns from those advertising efforts and investments dropped across the board. And many brands I know just kind of gave up. Uh, and many brands just kind of kept throwing spaghetti at the wall, so to speak, hoping something would stick. But now Meta has a brand new weapon, which they are calling Andromeda, and it really has changed everything again. And so the question is, will you ride this wave and grow with it, or get kind of lost in the noise? So what is this Andromeda update that Meta has rolled out? So let's kind of go through the lowdown. Essentially, Meta has recently finished building some of the largest data centers in the planet. Um, and, have a think about some of the tools, the tech tools that you might be using at the moment. I mean, probably most people are using ChatGPT, for example. ChatGPT does not have the ability to actually compute as much data as you might like. It's not, it's a bit of an aggregate, of a lot of content that it has access to, but it doesn't have the ability to compute all the data that exists, right? But Meta has essentially built these enormous data centers, and they have the ability to compute years of data, essentially the entire lifetime of their users who have, registered for accounts on Meta, or whether it's Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp or whatever. So it can now compute so many more permutations of data and information to really deeply understand the behavior of their audience. And they're now running such an advanced AI engine called Advantage Plus. And so you want to think of it like a really supercharged, brainy robot that can test millions of creative combinations in milliseconds. And its job, essentially, to match the perfect ad with the perfect person at the perfect time, which sounds quite amazing, right? But, and this is a really big but, this only works if you feed the AI the right stuff. So the algorithm is incredibly smart, but it's not a mind reader. It can't invent your brand message for you. It can't uncover your customers' deepest desires on its own. And it definitely can't sell your product if you don't first tell it why somebody should care. Which brings me to what I consider the most important shift that you need to make, that we all need to make as brand owners. And so here's what I believe brands must do now to thrive with Meta's new system. So under the new Andromeda system, success really depends on a few things. And number one, it means a deep understanding of your customer. You just cannot run a generic ad and expect it to convert. You can't just throw up a pretty product photo and hope for the best anymore. You certainly can't just do what you see your competitors are doing and expect it to work, right? You really need to deeply understand your own ideal customers. What problems are they trying to solve? What transformation are they chasing? Or, outcome or benefits are they really wanting to experience? What words might they use to describe their pain or their needs right now and their dreams? And what triggers them to say yes and hit that buy button on your online store? Because the content that you input, and by content, I'm talking about copy, I'm talking about visuals, I'm talking about, static images, video, music, your offers as well. And hopefully you're not just relying on discounts, because that is, first of all, pretty lazy marketing. And second of all, it only pulls in the people who are already ready to buy. It's not going to pull in the other people who are earlier on in their buyer journey and they're still thinking about those needs and wants, right? So all of those things really need to speak directly to those emotional drivers. Otherwise, the AI doesn't have the right ingredients to do its job. And Meta's AI can only deliver the perfect ad combination of all of those various bits of content if you give it the right ingredients. And that means, your messaging, the visuals, your offers, they all need to speak directly to your customers' emotions, desires, and objections. And then secondly, you need a bespoke brand specific strategy that really does align with this new ad setup. And perhaps I should have mentioned this before, but in all of these updates to the Meta ad algorithm, they have also introduced a completely new campaign type that is super relevant for e-commerce brands who are wanting to drive sales and run, ad campaigns that are going after purchases, right? So you need to forget duplicating someone else's funnel or copying that winning ad you might have seen in a Facebook group, or running a basic ad campaign or boosting a post and calling it a day. To succeed now with this new Andromeda update, every brand needs a custom strategy, and it needs to reflect your brand, it needs to reflect your products, it needs to reflect your customer journey, and it certainly needs to reflect your current level of business growth. And so this kind of a custom brand specific strategy needs to include how you structure and test your campaigns, especially using this new Advantage Plus sales campaign setup. You need to be considering your creative strategy across different funnel stages. And I can tell you now that, across all of the many brands that we work on and with, and including our own, whilst we might not have a traditional funnel structure like you might have used before or heard about before, a top of funnel, a middle of funnel, and a bottom of funnel retargeting, we might not have that particular construct in terms of building out campaigns, but your creative strategy certainly still needs to address those different stages of information requirements that your customers are going to have, depending on where they are at in their buying journey. And then also it needs to address how you're going to segment your audiences and deliver personalized content. Now, you might have heard people say that your ad creative is your new targeting and that you always just use broad audiences, and that's the sum total of thought process you might put into targeting. But, on the one hand, sure, it is true that we do need to have broad audiences that gives Meta's algorithm as much space to work within, for it to process and all of its various different permutations and be able to optimize. But it's still not as cut and dried as just having a broad audience and expecting it to work, right? And that's especially true if you are in a niche market or you're in a smaller market. I would say Australia is still a much smaller market than the US, for example, but certainly New Zealand is as well. So, there's definitely going to be different considerations or different answers for different brands to this kind of targeting question. And then also, how often do you need to refresh your creatives? This whole new campaign type and this Andromeda update certainly requires a vast amount of creative content. It is not something that, perhaps historically we might have had campaigns that had, maybe between 4 and 10 creatives, and that was as much as you would ever need. That's just not the case now. We need to have as many different variations as we possibly can, and we need to have a pipeline, a content pipeline that, is suited to your brand and the different kind of problems and needs and et cetera, that your customers have and that your products might address. So we need to have this kind of content pipeline that is always coming in to be able to refresh your ad creatives. So that's going to be different per brand. And then how do you also integrate your paid ads with your organic marketing and your email marketing to boost your customer lifetime value, as well as new customer conversions as well, of course. But, this is going to look different for different brands. Not least because different kind of product categories lend themselves to different sort of purchase types. So, for example, skincare is a consumable. There's a lot of barriers to getting people to make the first purchase, but then typically you have a really big opportunity for ongoing repeat purchases over many, many years, right? Versus other products that might just be a one-time buy. And, many different permutations in between there as well. So what I'm saying here is that this is not a plug and play moment. A one size fits all approach is not going to work at all anymore. And so your strategy needs to be uniquely yours if you really do want to stand out in this AI-powered sea of sameness. And then the third thing that you really need to incorporate with your response to this major update is that you need to treat this like a living, breathing machine, not a set and forget thing. And this is the step that I really do see a lot of brands skip, and it really does cost them a fortune. So this new meta environment, like I said, is not set and forget. You really must be on top of your numbers daily. And what this means, not necessarily an exhaustive list here, but super important. You must know your margins. You really need to understand your fixed and variable costs so that you can determine how much that you can actually afford to spend on your ads to acquire a customer. Otherwise, scaling your ads is just going to bleed money. Secondly, you really need to be tracking your in-platform metrics as well, and that includes return on ad spend, even if that figure may not be a determining factor on how profitable or successful your business ultimately is, but it is a metric that platforms like Meta use when it decides how much to feed out a particular ad creative, for example, right? So you need to be tracking daily your return on ad spend, your click-through rate, your cost per acquisition, your MER, so that's your marketing efficiency ratio, and also even looking at things like your cost per your CPM, so that's your cost per million impressions. And that is the pricing structure for advertising, right? Even things like thumb stop rate, outbound click-throughs, things like that. So the whole shebang, right? Like this is going to give you a really thorough understanding of how your specific ads are performing, and determines, that content pipeline that I was talking about. And these numbers are your compass, right? So it's going to show you which combinations of creative elements are winning and where things are tanking. Do you need to pivot? Do you need to buckle down? Do you need to scale, et cetera, et cetera? And you do need to be ready to pivot quickly. So if an ad is fatiguing and your costs are rising, you need to be acting fast to, add in new creative options, testing perhaps a new angle, changing up your offer. So speed and agility is going to win in this new game. And also, creative iteration is non-negotiable. Most ads don't perform well right away, and even the good ones will ultimately burn out eventually, sometimes quite quickly. And so you definitely need to have a process to regularly brainstorm, test, and launch new speak clearly, girl. New ad variations, and to do so ideally every week. So creative iteration, it does require a process, because it's a little bit like, well, I don't know if you're a creative type of person, but if you don't have a structure for doing this kind of work, you will end up feeling like you've got writer's block, you're staring at a blank page. So you definitely need to learn a process to be able to do that. So in short, if you really do want to scale profitably, or even just keep like a status quo, like stay where you're at in terms of revenue, or maybe improve your profitability, but not necessarily scale, regardless of how ambitious you are. I don't want to presume that everybody wants to scale super rapidly, right? But if you're going to be spending money on ads in order to keep the traffic and the sales coming into your online store, then you do need to operate like a media buyer and a CEO. So knowing your numbers, watching them daily, and using them to guide your decisions. So as an e-commerce founder, as a brand owner, what should you be doing next? Now, I know this might be feeling a little bit overwhelming at the moment, potentially a little bit confusing. You might be thinking, gosh, things are super quiet, or things are just super unpredictable. It's really hard to get traffic at the moment. So wherever you're at the moment, just know that the game has changed, and it can be hard to keep up with all of these changes when you are busy running your business. And, a lot of business owners are wearing lots of hats in their business. And, that does make keeping up with major tech changes a pretty challenging thing. But here's the thing, adapting to this new Andromeda update that Meta has rolled out, it isn't just about flipping a switch on your ads. It's about rethinking how you market and how you measure, and also how you scale. Now, to that end, that's one of the big reasons why we here at Productpreneur have introduced a e-commerce quick wins strategy session. And, we're pretty conscious of the fact that everyone is super busy. It's a fairly crazy time in the world at the moment, politically, and, all of that kind of stuff adds an extra layer of uncertainty. And so it can, people like me, like you as a business owner, you don't want to invest a huge amount of time chasing some kind of elusive silver bullet, I know, which is why we've introduced this quick wins strategy session. So it's short and it's going to be super to the point. It's designed to help you pinpoint the biggest gaps in your current traffic and sales strategy, to help you understand how much you can spend on ads, for example, based on your margins, to help you discover how to read your data like a pro so that you know exactly what's working, and also how to build a simple plan to grow your revenue profitably under this kind of new system, this new AI and driven Andromeda system. And the goal is that you get to walk away with a roadmap that outlines your best next moves tailored to your brand and not some cookie cutter strategy. So we have some limited spots available. So if you'd like to see if there's one at a day and time that suits you, you can head to katherinelangman.com/quick wins and book your session in. So I'd love to help you make sure that your next ad dollar actually grows your business. So that's it for today's episode. Not too long, to the point. And, hopefully you've found it helpful. If you have found it helpful, please make sure you share it with a business bestie who needs to hear this too, somebody who might feel like they're just, floundering with things just not being the way they were. And also just want to leave a final message with you to remember that the brands that thrive are the ones that adapt quickly. So we're here to help with that, but you've got this. I'll see you next time.